Will democracy survive in the next couple of years?
And essentially, we are the same.
And there are so many needs that Minnesota has.
What people are saying they need right now.
Access to democracy is made possible by donations from the following organizations. Thomson Reuters, a global company with expertise and insight to unravel complex situations in the areas of law, tax, compliance, government, and media. Their worldwide network of journalists and editors keep customers up to speed on relevant global events. Thomson Reuters, the Answer Company. Crutchfield Dermatology, a full-service treatment center in Medi-Spa in Eagan. Their goal is to help you look good and feel great with beautiful skin. With service built around courtesy, dignity, and respect, Mayo-trained Dr. Charles Crutchfield personally treats each patient and is acknowledged as one of the nation's best physicians. Firefly Credit Union, with locations throughout the Twin Cities, has proudly served Minnesotans since 1925. Firefly guides its members forward by delivering customized financial solutions to improve their lives in all aspects of banking. Firefly Credit Union, they light the way with life illuminated. Edina Eye, Physicians and Surgeons, a division of Twin Cities Eye Consultants, has proudly served the Twin Cities for more than 55 years. Now in 7 convenient locations. Using the most advanced technology combined with human touch, Edina Eye offers comprehensive services but dedicated specialists committed to excellence with innovative procedures and expertise for the most advanced eye
care. And welcome back to Access to Democracy. Alan Miller with you as usual, and we have a very special extra guest, new guest. Very well-known guest, one of the top 50 Asian Americans in film, voted so by, I think, IMDb or one of the film publications. He's a director. Probably his most famous attribute at the moment is that he's the father of TV star Griffin Gluck, who starred in TV for a while. And I first met Cellin Gluck when he was about 20 years old and going to Pomona College. And actually, he stayed with us for a few months. And Cellin, welcome back.
Glad to be back. Good to see you again, Alan.
It's amazing how time seems to just pass by.
Oh yeah, I've got a son now. As you mentioned, my son Griffin's a little bit younger than I was when I first met you, but my daughter is 23 and she's way older than when we first met.
Yeah, that's right.
Than I was when we first met.
Well, what does she do?
Good question. She actually went to Bard College out in New York. And, she majored in, I think, international relations and human rights or some other such money-making venture. And she's home now, like much of the world.
No, I guess we all are. We're confined to quarters.
Yeah.
All our kids are back east. So, although my son Pierre moved here last September, right before everything hit the fan.
Right.
So we have him about 20 minutes away from us, and that's really refreshing after all these years of having our kids long distance all over the East Coast. And we get to see him pretty often, and that's really refreshing and very nice.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, it's, I guess that is, that's the, should we say, the hidden positive part of all this COVID is that we actually get to spend some family time together.
Yeah, if there is a positive part of it, I guess that's it. Now, Cellin is from a really well-known family. Jay and Sumi Gluck, his parents. Jay was a New Yorker. Sumi is a Japanese American. They were writers. They both passed, unfortunately. We spent some wonderful time with them, not only in their home in, was it Kobe or Kyoto?
I was in Kobe. It was Ashia, which was just outside of Kobe.
Right. spent a week there and had a wonderful week being ferried around to see sites in Japan that we would have never seen. And of course, you are multicultural and bilingual, so it has stood you in really good stead in terms of the movie industry, in which you are certainly a well-known director. Sideways, the Japanese version, Black Rain, the Michael Douglas picture, Oba, The Last Samurai, and a movie, Persona non grata, I shouldn't forget that, about Chinue Sugihara, which is a story that most people don't know about the Japanese official who saved hundreds and hundreds of Jewish lives during World War II by giving them visas, which I don't think his government even knew about. And as a matter of fact, he is considered a hero in Israel as a result of that. And Cellin did a movie about him about what, 5, 6 years ago?
Yeah, but it'll be 5 years ago this December.
Called Persona non grata. And there you've got it.
There you go. Oh, nice DVD there.
Yes, yes indeed. And when I taught my Holocaust course, he was one of the characters who was very, very influential. Now, there's a movie called Way to Find the Best Life, 2019, which lists you. It's a movie I'm not familiar with. What was it about?
It's a Japanese remake of Warner Brothers' Bucket List. And we were originally supposed to shoot a lot of the scenes in the U.S. and we only ended up doing a few scenes in the U.S. But I did all of the. I think if anybody remembers the original, there was a sequence where the two of them go skydiving, and as luck would have it, we ended up with essentially some of the same crew, and we shot it at the same location as the original was shot here in California. So.
Interesting. And it showed in Japan. I think somebody was nominated for an award in Japan.
Yeah, I believe it was. I mean, it opened in Japan and it did fairly well. So I mean, it's a remake of a classic. So
now, because you're fluent in Japanese, you have spent a lot of time going back and forth. You have spent a lot of time on American films that involve Japanese personalities, be it war films or otherwise, where you have not only been involved with staff, a directed or second director, but you also did a lot of the translation. So that certainly has had to be an interesting career for you.
Oh yeah, definitely interesting. I mean, it's been a fallback, so to speak. I mean, it did give me my entree into, well, yes and no. I mean, I started off as an assistant director in feature films after working in commercials between Japan and the U.S. for a while. And the first major film I worked on, as you mentioned, was Black Rain, directed by Ridley Scott. And it was actually shot, most of it was shot about 15 minutes from my parents' house that you mentioned in Ashiya in Osaka. And that got me going in the feature world, where I worked for an assistant director for many years, and going back and forth between, the U.S. and Japan, having the language ability, shall we say, and also the cultural know-how. It served me in good stead, for sure.
And you've been involved in about 60 films during your career?
Probably more like 16, but yeah, somewhere in that neighborhood. It looks good on IMDb. I don't know. I haven't really counted.
Yeah, it takes up a big section of IMDb because I looked there obviously before this interview. So you ended up on our doorstep in Long Island when, I don't know if it was between your junior and senior year or during your senior year when you had just graduated.
Yeah.
And I think you were searching out work at the time.
Well, I think Tyrone and I were commuting between your house and Manhattan, looking for a place to live, but always making sure to get back and watch Gaijin with you guys. Was it Gaijin? Yeah, it was Gaijin, right? I mean, on NBC. No, it was Shogun.
Yeah, Shogun,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, that's right.
And when we say Tyrone, we're talking about Tyrone Power Jr., the son of the famous, late and great, and certainly a close friend to you at that time, although I think you've drifted apart a little bit since then. But that was a very interesting experience for us, and I guess for you. And you ended up with ESPN.
Well, I did some stuff with ESPN. I mean, I did a lot with ABC Sports. I mean, at that time, I ended up working for a Japanese sports promotion company. So we did a lot of work with ABC. We did a little bit with NBC. And I think we even did one event with CBS. But I mean, I think, yeah, at that time, most of the stuff I was doing was with either ABC or ESPN. You're right.
Now, this is back, what, 1980 something?
Yeah, it was 80, 81, 82,
Right.
just that, right in there.
And one of the perks that we got out of putting you guys up for a couple of months was the fact that we got tickets to go with you to Japan for what was the annual college football game.
Yeah, it was the Mirage Bowl, which was held between two U.S. college teams in one of their regular season games, and I think that was Houston SMU, wasn't it? Wasn't that the year?
No, I don't think it was. I think it was. I'm trying to remember what other teams.
Yeah, it was either
LSU. I think was one of them. And in any event, both teams and us, as your guests and all, were on a 747 for Tokyo.
Yeah.
What amazed me is that the fact that the plane with the equipment and these huge ball players was able to get off the ground back then. and we did. And we had, thanks to you, we had a great week in Japan. We went all over Japan and spent a week with your folks and then flew back after the game. And,
yeah, those are the good old days when we could just charter a 747 and send people halfway around the world. That was good times.
That was, and it was certainly good times for us. That was my only experience in Japan, as a matter of fact. So, talk about, well, which of your films is your favorite that you were involved in?
I don't know. I mean, it's hard to say. You know, it's like saying which of your kids are your favorite. And that may actually be easier. Look, the one that I'm most proud of, I would say, is the latest one I did was Persona non Grata, the story of Chiuna Sugihara. We shot that almost entirely in Poland, actually entirely in Poland, except for a day or two of actual footage, scenery in Japan. That was an accomplishment. I mean, we had a great time being in a country that was foreign to all of us, not just the Japanese filmmakers and the Japanese cast, but the American filmmakers. And it was an Japanese-American, Polish co-production. And though the story takes place in Lithuania, we ended up shooting in Poland because, as recently as 5 years ago, Lithuania didn't have much of a of a film industry, and they didn't have what we needed. So we went down to neighboring Poland, which ended up, once again, a very serendipitous choice, because the majority of the principal characters who aren't Japanese were Polish refugees. And since we were a fairly major motion picture, in the scale of what ends up being shot in Warsaw, not only did we end up with the best of the Japanese actors, but we also ended up with the best of the Polish actors. So in that sense, that was my favorite. But once again, having said that, I had a great time doing my first film that I was able to direct from beginning to end, and that was Sideways. And we shot that entirely here in the U.S. But we did the original one better, because when I was told that I was going to be doing Sideways, we decided that instead of going to Santa Barbara, we were going to go into the heart of the beast, so to speak. And we went to Napa, and we actually shot that film in 23 days. So that was an accomplishment in itself. You know, and then we did Oba the Last Samurai. We shot in Thailand. So
Did you work on the original Sideways?
I did not. No, I mean the original Sideways, although I had a bigger budget than we did, you know, it was one of those films that it was just when they were making it, it was just another film. So it had no attraction to me in the sense that it had nothing to do with Japan, and I had no connections to any of the filmmakers. So that's the only reason I didn't end up working for it.
I remember from, I guess Giamatti was on that,
Yeah.
on the American version. And yours was entirely for a Japanese audience.
Yes, it was. But although I'd say 40% of the film is in English, and you can find it on iTunes for anybody who's interested.
Or you can contact me, and I have a couple of DVDs
Uh-oh.
here.
Uh-oh. We won't tell anybody about that.
So, what was it like working with Michael Douglas on Black Rain? And that was early in your career.
It was great. I mean, look, you know, of course, it was my first major film, and I get to work with Michael Douglas, and you know, got to be very good friends with him and Andy Garcia, and of course, you know, Ken Takakura, one of Japan's most, you know, famous actors throughout the world, world famous actors. I mean, it was, and come on, I mean, your first film and you get to work with Ridley Scott, is how much better can it get? So, I mean, it was fantastic because, you know, obviously everyone there, the majority of the American crew, they were fishes out of water, shall we say, in Japan. And like I told you, it was a 15-minute train ride from where I grew up. So it was great when we weren't working, it was great to be, you know, the ones that would be able to get them what they needed in Japan, you know, and I don't know. I mean, we worked so hard on that film. We worked 6 days a week. And back in those days, when you went overseas, you did what was called a sliding start, which meant that you started Monday morning at around 6 a.m. and you'd push the start time 2 hours a day. You know, so Tuesday you're starting at 8, and Wednesday you're starting at 10. Thursday you're starting around noon. Friday you're starting at 2 in the afternoon. And then Saturday, you're starting at 4 in the afternoon, and you come back from work at 4 or 5 in the morning on Sunday, and you have a day off, right? So, but your day off is essentially spent in bed, and you'll be back to work on Monday. So, I mean, that was a real tough one. I mean, I think it was the total number of days we worked on that film was 127 days, you know, in Japan, in New York, in Los Angeles, up in Napa. I mean, it was pretty amazing.
It's really a detective story. And as a matter of fact, Ken played a Japanese detective who was working with Michael Douglas. I'm trying to recall what Andy Garcia's part was in it, but I don't. That escapes me. But it was a good film. It still is a good film.
I mean, it still holds up.
It absolutely holds up with the passage of time. Now, I mentioned very briefly Jay and Sumi Gluck, your parents.
Yeah.
Your father was from the United States, Brooklyn, if I'm not mistaken.
I was from Manhattan. 52nd.
Okay. And he was a writer, among other things. And your mother was a Japanese American who, if I'm not mistaken, was interned during World War II.
Yes, she was from the San Joaquin Valley. She was from a little town named Lodi, California, and spent the war years in Rower, Arkansas. But she was,
one of the great blotches in American history is the fact that we rounded up our Japanese Americans and put them in camps, which were in effect concentration camps. And yet toward the end of the war, some young Japanese males really volunteered for the army and went on to serve in Europe as one of the most decorated units of the United States government. So,
yeah, I mean, it's the most highly decorated unit in United States military history. And as a matter of fact, at the end of the war, their battalion colors, so to speak, was retired. You know,
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So I don't remember how your parents met, But
They actually met. They actually met in New York because it's another twist of fate. It's like you said, the Executive Order 9066, which ordered the incarceration of over 110,000 American citizens, majority of them American citizens, from the West Coast, spread throughout numerous camps throughout the U.S. I mean, it was, as you said, it's to say the least, it's a stain on our history, and it's something that cannot be forgotten and not be allowed to ever happen again. Although things seem to be leaning in that direction as we stand right now, but we'll leave that one alone. My mother,
we don't have
to
leave that one alone.
Well, my mother, to her, it was probably, in some ways, she said the best thing that ever happened to her, because she got to row her, and according to her and I, and last year I checked with her younger sister, Auntie Kay, who's the only one alive, and she said, yes, Sumi got out of there as quickly as she could. So I think my mom was out of there by the middle, if not the end of 1943, and she managed to snag a scholarship to Hunter College in New York. And they didn't meet. They met after the war because my dad, being a good New York Jew, lied about his age, joined the Navy, wanted to go kill Germans, so he was off and in training, and then they met in New York after the war.
And they had a really interesting life. I'm being kissed on my elbow by a little Springer here called Katie, who is she's our local child, a Springer rescue. They really did so much together, including writing. In fact, one of the most impressive things that they did was a book called Japan Inside Out. You might recognize that.
I recognize that.
That they wrote with your late brother Garrett. And it's probably the most complete book on Japan that's in existence, albeit there has been a passage of time, but it's really Japan Inside Out. It's just a fascinating book. Huge undertaking.
Yeah, they wrote that when I remember being dragged around Japan as a kid. I don't remember it, but I remember seeing photos, of being in all sorts of places while they were writing it in the early 60s, because it was originally published as a 5-volume guide to Japan for the 64 Olympics. And then my brother Garrett traveled around Japan after he graduated from college in the early 90s or late 80s, early 90s, and updated it. So the last update, I think it's up to date as of 1992. But, with a country with over 2,000 years of history, the majority of the historical facts that are represented in that book, as my father used to say, one of his early favorite writers was E.E. Cummings, and he said in a lot of the shorthand that he uses to write is in, I guess, in that style. And he says it's a 1,200 page book without a single article,
and also very few capitals.
There you go. Yeah. I think his other childhood hero was Archie Immehittable, the Archie the cockroach, who used to type by diving onto the the keys of the Underwood typewriter. But since he was a cockroach, he couldn't push the shift key. So everything that he typed, there was nothing in capital either.
But they were an incredible couple, really generous to us. Of course, we saw them in later years in New York a few times before they passed, unfortunately. But it was a great relationship. They also spent some time in what was Persia, which really became Iran, and they knew the Shah, and they managed to pick up a lot of artifacts and ultimately opened a museum in Japan of really Persian and Middle Eastern artifacts.
Yes, they did. They had a couple of museums at one point. There was one in Nara, which was the the Asia Museum, or the Asia House, I think it was called. Oh no, I'm sorry, it was the Orient House in Nara, and then they had a museum also down in the Persia House was in downtown Kobe, in
Yeah.
one of the older captain's homes.
Persia House is the one that we got to see,
Right.
and fascinating, with all the artifacts and things that they had collected. Never did understand that relationship with the late Shah of Iran, but
Well, I'll give you a quick update on that, and the reason, you know, to go back to when my father was a kid growing up in Manhattan, you know, while all the other kids were out in the park playing out in the park, my dad used to play at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and the first piece of art that he fell in love with was attributed to Benvenuto Cellini, you know, the Renaissance sculptor ne'er-do-well,
right.
And that's why I'm named Cellin off of Cellini. And my dad says he was probably about 12 years old, and he was sitting on one of the big lions outside the public library down there on 42nd Street. And there was a parade going on. And he said this older gentleman came out, you know, and looked up at him and saw him sitting on the lion. And my dad was all panicked that he was going to get in trouble. And as he was climbing down, the older gentleman said, "Son, don't worry about it. Would you like to see some beautiful things?" And took him inside. And that was Arthur Upham Pope, who is probably to this date one of the foremost experts on ancient Persia. And Pope had just come back from Iran or from Persia, and he used to have these magnificent photos that he took with a big old 4x5 camera, and he had an exhibit at the New York Public Library. And my father went and saw that, and that's when he fell in love with Iran or ancient Persia, the Middle East. And then, you know, fast forward 20 years later, after the war, he ended up going to do his graduate studies with Pope at the Asia Institute in New York, which in the late 60s was taken over by the Shah. The Shah took the Asia Institute while Pope was still alive and moved the entire institute to Iran, to Shiraz, to Naranjistan, and my father was invited to come over and be like his adjutant or the acting director, because even then Pope was already into his mid-80s. So that's how we ended up in Iran.
And interesting childhood growing up.
It was fantastic. I'd go back there in a second.
And a little tough today, but I always kidded.
It's only tough today because, you know, because of the nut that we have on Pennsylvania Avenue of getting back into the country. You know, that's what we're more worried about than the time that we would spend in Iran.
I just wrote something about that nut today, saying that how can they have a presidential library when he doesn't read books and he hides all the documents? So I decided that the presidential library will be in Mar-a-Lago, and all it will have is 2 shelves worth of anti-Trump books in it.
And a bunch of portraits of him, you know.
That he commissioned.
Yeah, that he commissioned, of course.
Yeah, including on the cover of Time magazine.
Right, exactly. So I mean, I think no, there might be a fairly good collection of fake Time covers and, you know, and a bunch of fake news up on the shelves. So you never know.
And that's what's going to be. In any event, I always used to kid your father. I said, I know you're CIA, and that's why you move in all these strange places. And he was
in his dying breath, as you know, as he lay there in bed. But I think it was probably the last time I saw him. I looked at him and I said, "Okay, Dad, you know, I got to go to Japan tomorrow for work. Just promise me you're going to be here when you come back. When I come back." And he could barely talk. And he looked up at me, and he blinked his eyes, and I said, "You're lying." And he smiled, and I said, "Well, just lie to me so that I can go." And he smiled at me, and then I said, "You know, it's time that you finally came clean." I said, "You got to tell me you're CIA, right?" And he looked up at me, and he smiled, and beckoned with his finger, and I leaned over him, and he goes, "Yeah, CIA." And I said, I knew it, you old fucker." And he goes, "CIA, collector of Iranian art." You know, and I think those are the last words I exchanged with him. So
and that was his sense of humor, which was a terrific sense of humor. Now we're down to the last couple of minutes. So what projects do you have if we ever get back to normal in this country.
Oh God, whatever that normal is going to be. I don't know. I mean, it's been an interesting 4 months. Surprisingly, we've spent a lot of time on Zooms with fellow directors, and especially with members of the various diversity committees at the Directors Guild. We have the Asian American Committee, we have the African American Committee, we have the Women's Steering Committee, and we've got the Latino Committee. And it's been an interesting experience in that sense that it's brought all of us together, little and big. Directors of, nobody's been working. So for the first time in the history of the Directors Guild, everybody's been able to attend meetings. So in that sense, we've been involved in steering, the awareness of the Directors Guild and all those things. That has been the busiest time that I've had. And I don't know, once again, is it serendipity? I don't know. I got a call yesterday saying that a feature film that I was supposed to direct in Paris last year for Japan once again, and had gone away because we lost the lead actor. We thought it was dead. It was supposed to be shot. Then it was pushed to September. Thought it was dead. Got a call yesterday from my producer saying, let's rework the script. So send me the latest version that you have, and we'll see. Fingers crossed, this time next year, I'll be in Paris shooting another film.
Good luck. We've been talking to Cellin Gluck, and I forgot to mention that he's also a writer as well as a producer and director, and one of the top Asian Americans in film. Takes me back a lot of years talking to you, and we'll have to do this again.
Absolutely.
Cellin, so much for, and good luck to both you and Griffin in his TV career, which we didn't get to talk about, but we'll do that another time.
Well, Griffin's off to Toronto in 3 weeks, hopefully. So fingers crossed. Him going back to work, I hope is going to mean the same for a lot of us. So.
Well, thanks so much, and it's been a pleasure.
Likewise, Alan.
Access to democracy.